November is National Veterans and Military Families Month, and here on Jersey Magazine this morning, my guest is a veteran and the founder of Self-Reliant Leadership, Jan Rutherford. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on, Jim.
Jan, to get started, I want to go to your military background because I find it fascinating. In fact, you wrote a book about it,
Yeah.
and you ended up enlisting in the Army and going into the Green Berets. How did that happen? Tell us about that.
So the story is I wanted to be a musician, and I got a chair at the University of Florida as a percussionist, and I told my parents, and they said, "Great. Does that come with a scholarship?" I said, "No, it does not." They said, "In case you hadn't realized, we have no money. We can't send you to college." So, as I looked at that, I thought, you know, I don't want to stay home and work and go to community college. And, um, I went down to the recruiter in Miami and said, "Hey, I'm interested." And they go, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to join the band." And after they stopped laughing, because they never had people come in and saying that, they said, "Well, we'll fly you on a plane and you'll do an audition." And I thought, great, I've never been on a plane before. So I flew up to a base up in Georgia and tried out. And on the way back, I just had this epiphany that I had an okay audition, but I realized, boy, I'm okay because I work really hard. There's people that are just immensely talented. So I get off the plane, and this is back in the day, people could meet you at the jetway, and the recruiter's there, and he says, "All right, are we going to do it?" And I said, "Sergeant Fleener, no, I'm not going to do it." And he's like, ah. I go, "But I really want to jump out of planes. I think that would be cool. And I want to be the best trained medic the Army has to offer." And he goes, "Great, you need to go Special Forces." And I said, "Kyle, I do not want to be, you know, a policeman, Special Forces. I thought that was, a police." And he said, "No, Special Forces is the Green Berets." And he shows me this brochure, and it's guys with biceps like this, and they're in rubber boat. And I said, "I can't do this." And he looked me in the eyes and he said, "Yes, you can." I said, "Okay, I'll do it." And he said, "But there's just one problem. You weigh 101 pounds. You have to weigh 103 and get a waiver to jump out of planes. Otherwise, you'll hit the side of the plane." So I gained weight. I got up to 109, joined while I was still a senior in high school. And then the day I went in the Army, I weighed 114.
That is
And,
amazing.
and I was 17, 2 weeks out of high school, and it was really hard. And it's just interesting, looking back. And I've told this story a lot of times. You could probably tell. But of all the right door, left door, the forks in the road, that was probably the thing that changed my life the most. And it came at a really good time when I had confidence, but I didn't have confidence. And going through that and not wanting to fail, not wanting to, I wanted to quit, but I didn't. I didn't want to fail. I didn't want people to be proven right that I wouldn't make it. And, what it did is it said, you can do hard stuff. And for those of us that have a few years of experience, we know life is filled with hard stuff. I mean, and anything worth achieving is there's sacrifice required, and it's going to be hard, and you're going to take your lumps. And whenever you get a little bit cocky and think you've got it all figured out, something's going to jump up and remind you that you don't.
You
So,
mentioned wanting to become a medic. Where did that aspect come from, Jan?
well, when I was a kid, up in I when I was a kid, I wanted to be a doctor. and and then I got into music, and in high school I really didn't study. I worked full time, 40 hours a week cleaning a meat department. So my grades went to crap, and I thought, well, I'm never going to get to med school. But I still had an interest in medicine. I really liked the idea of helping people. And truth be told, what I loved most about the military literally was I loved jumping out of planes. I mean, I loved all the rappelling and all that kind of stuff. And I really loved treating patients. I mean, I loved, when people came to the aid station, or I came up upon a casualty. I loved making it better. I loved that way more than the Army stuff. I mean, I had, hunted when I was a kid. I really didn't care about guns. I mean, it wasn't my thing, you know. So, um, yeah, and again, I looked at it as a means to an end. I never thought it was going to be a career. I thought, I'll be able to go in, save up money. And when I went in, it was between GI Bills. Vietnam era veterans got a GI Bill. Global War on Terror veterans, post 9/11 veterans have a GI Bill. I did not have one. They had a really small program where I put in a dollar, they put in $2. And so, what ended up happening is when I was in college for 3 years, I got, what was it? I put in $75 a month and they matched it with 150. So 225 a month is what I got for college. No big thing at the beginning of the semester. It was for 8 months of the year I was in college, I got 225 a month. And then $100 from ROTC and $100 from a reserve unit. So I had to work in college too, because, even back then, 450 wasn't enough to pay for school, room, board, and everything else.
For listeners who are actually watching this video, they can see over your right shoulder the name of your latest book, Becoming a Self-Reliant Leader. The military is about, at least from my perspective, not having been in it, but fathers, grandfathers, you're following orders. So you're following a leader. How much of becoming a good leader is being a good follower?
Oh, it's everything. I mean, you really nailed it. The epiphany I had, learning how to patrol, how to lead, soldiers on a patrol in the woods. You're a follower, and then all of a sudden they decide the leader has been whacked, and then they say, "Hey, you're the leader now." Well, if you weren't a good follower, when you're the leader, nobody's going to follow you. And that was the whole concept of you have to be squared away. You can't be shivering and cold. You got to figure out how to be warm. You've got to figure out how to pack your pack so that the weight's evenly distributed. You've got to do all these things so that you're prepared. And so the whole idea of self-reliant leadership is that you're reliant so that you're reliable, but you're also creating self-reliant people that are your direct reports. Because what self-reliant people do as followers is they have a shared sense of duty to one another. And that's the dream of a leader is, boy, these guys, these gals, they're going to manage each other. They're going to hold each other accountable. I have less work to do. And that's what we're all striving for. And any team out there, they can all relate. There's a weak link, and it's that guy or that gal that's not pulling their weight, figuratively or literally. And we've all got to do that. But it's also the leader that has to inspire that in individuals and the team.
You kind of anticipated where I was going with my next question, which was learning how to take care of yourself first before you can take care of others.
Right. Yeah. I mean, well, and my pillars of leadership are lead yourself, lead others, lead the organization. Well, when you're at the lead the organization and you're designing an environment where great things happen, well, you realize that really goes back to leading yourself. Every CEO I work with knows I've got to get better at communicating. I have to be squared away physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, or I won't have the energy to lead. I won't have the wherewithal to see the big picture. And so it all does come back here. But then what we realize is at the end of the day, it is not about me. It's never about you. It's about everybody else. And, and it's like every group I work with, organizations are internally focused, people are internally focused, but we have to realize, we're here to serve others. A good life is lived in the service of others. Great companies are great because they live their existence in the service of others, their clients, their customers. I mean, we're all here. I mean, we can be pleasure-seeking people, which is all temporary fulfillment and happiness, but the real fulfillment comes from serving other people. And maybe that gets back to your question about wanting to be a medic.
You talked about leadership and communication skills. How important is listening
No,
as a
yeah.
leader?
Well, it's everything. I mean, and it manifests itself as a leader in what you're doing right now is asking really great questions. helping people self-discover. I mean, great leaders don't say, hey, Jim, in that meeting you interrupted people, don't interrupt people. Great leaders will say, hey, how did you think that meeting went? That interaction you had with Mike, what do you think there? Oh yeah, I interrupted him. Yeah, how do you think that made Mike feel? Oh, I mean, that's coaching, that's leading. What we see a lot of times in the military, we call it the knife edge. Do this, do that. And these days, people don't want that. They want autonomy. They want to develop mastery. They want to learn and grow, but we've got to help them get there. We just can't command and control. And by the way, command and control never worked. It didn't work 30 years ago. The best leaders, everyone thinks the military is about people barking out orders. The best leaders, if they ever had to give an order in their name, if they're using their rank, they failed. They failed. Great leaders, ask great questions and get people to do things.
You and I were speaking before we came on the air this morning about helping veterans transition, whether it's coming from a combat situation or not. I think just being in the military and transitioning back into the civilian world it can be quite jarring. What's the biggest obstacle from your perspective when you're dealing with veterans who are making the transition?
It's a great question, Jim. The biggest obstacle is the lack of curiosity. That's the biggest obstacle. Think about it. They've been experts for 20 years. The way that they've earned confidence is by being competent. And all of a sudden they're thrust into a world where, hey, I've been a really good leader, put me in charge. Well, you don't know the industry. You don't have business acumen. You don't know, you've never had to create demand. That's one thing that doesn't happen in the military. There's nothing that is about creating demand. And so a lot of times I see the veterans come out and they'll hear some nuggets of problems and they'll think, well, here's the solution. It's like, no, you've got to be curious times 10 because trust me, whatever the conclusion you're going to jump to is premature. And in the military, we were rewarded for being decisive. A lot of times they would say, make a decision, any decision. That's better than no decision. In the business world, we hardly ever have to make a decision very quickly. And that's a hard thing too. And again, if somebody steps back and says, hey, I need to ask a lot of questions, I need to be curious, I need to guard against assuming anything, the transition would be so much easier.
What about a person who's working as a team of one?
Mm.
Where does leadership come in there?
Oh, geez. Well, I always say, I've got a small company, and if I really look around and count the people that work with me and help me, some I pay and most I don't. I mean, it's collaborative. There's probably 40 people around me. I would say if you're an entrepreneur, a team of one, and you feel lonely, you're doing something wrong. I have never been lonely. I've never felt like I'm missing out on not being on a team. I've never felt that. So I don't know. I don't know of anybody that can be successful and think they're all by themselves.
One of the things that in looking at your website, I saw these Crucible journeys. Tell our listeners about that. They seem fascinating.
Yeah, I've done 25 of them over the last 10 years. We take executives who need a digital detox out with military veterans who are transitioning. So the executives basically learn you've got to slow down to speed up. The military veterans really learn, hey, there's a commonality with the problems they're facing, but there's a different vocabulary. And again, that other element is, business is about creating demand. Somebody has to generate revenue for anything to tick. In the military, they have budgets because they spend money, but there's no element where they have to, make the money. So we go out in different places. Most of our crucibles have been in Moab and Utah and the mountains of Colorado, but we have been to Alaska, we've been to Patagonia and Chile and Argentina, and there's always an epiphany out there. That's what the book is about. We basically said, hey, here's like 12 steps of things that happen on every crucible, but there's always a group dynamic that makes it a little different. And what we did is we said, okay, this happens. Here's a story from the crucible. Here's how it applies to the business world. Here's how it applies to the framework of leading self, others, and the organization. And that's how we really threaded the book. And we're hoping, it's a great framework for people because the Crucible doesn't scale. I can't take 1,000 people out. But we really tried to capture the experience in the book, and my co-author helped interview of the 250 plus people that have participated. She probably interviewed a third of them, and their stories are in there. So it's not just my perspective and my co-author's perspective on the Crucible. We really have taken the collective wisdom of all past participants.
When was the last time you jumped out of an airplane?
Oh gosh, I can tell you exactly. It was it was July 1985. That was a long time ago. I
Do you
had
miss it?
not anymore. I did it at the beginning, but now I think, it's kind of like, been there, done that. I mean, the riskiest thing I do these days probably is mountain bike and snowboard. Um, but and I did become a pilot, which was really cool, and I don't fly anymore. It's interesting as you go through, your perspective on the risk and the reward it changes. I wouldn't be scared to jump out of a plane. I just wouldn't have a desire to do it at this point, and it's changed. So many people have done it, and it's so commonplace. Back then it was, I mean, I I think by the time I jumped out of a plane, I think that might have been my fifth airplane ride. I
Wow.
mean, yeah. So the whole thing was novel. I mean, just everything about it.
The book is called Becoming a Self-Reliant Leader, and you can learn more about Jan at self-reliantleadership.com. Jan Rutherford, thank you so much for your time this morning. This has been a fascinating conversation.
Well, thank you, Jim. Thanks for having me on, and hopefully, in this month of celebrating our veterans, people can say thank you to a few of them, especially the ones that have deployed overseas over the last 20 years. So thank you.